Hey friends, I just found an interesting piece published in a newspaper and it's talking about Labour's landslide victory should prompt a rethink on international students. So basically, in Australian federal election, Labour Party secured a very thumping majority. And Labour has maintained a very progressive approach toward international students, though they cap the number of students coming to Australia, but still but overall approach has been very progressive. Like, long before coalition bloc Labour planned to cap the number of international students in Australia last November, the debate was more or less xenophobic and was mired in dirty politics. And the discussions which were happening around international students were more in the election environment. The elections were coming. Everyone was like going into that political climate mode. So, yeah, it was having its influence on the policies. But then a group was continuously advocating that the international education sector is Australia's largest service export. It worth around 25 billion pound or 51 billion Australian dollar alone in the last financial year. And these are very compelling number. But as the environment was political, they were just not cutting through. And the parties were giving their opinion based on what they think will cut through across their voter. But now the election result have changed certain things because Labour, with a clear majority in the House of Representatives, they can now reintroduce the legislation to Senate, and because the party will only need the support of Greens to pass a bill there, so now they are in a position for more progressive agenda, which are closer to the values of the Labour. The political reason for doing it are very abundantly clear. Data from the Australian Electoral Commission shows that the Labour government performed especially well among culturally diverse groups in the elections. Polling booths with a high number of voters from Chinese background helped them make close contest of seats that Liberal Party won expected, like Menzies. These voters also helped Labour win Deakin, unseating Shadow Minister for Housing Michael Sukkar in the process. Meanwhile, the electorates with a high proportion of voters from Indian background secured Labour victories in Melbourne, outer western suburb. The Liberal Party failed to make inroads in a region considered a key election background. Culturally diverse groups are key players in Australia's democracy and politics, and many are likely to have settled in the country having come as an international student. So, for Labour Party or for Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, capping the number of international students in Australia's sector might erode this emerging support base which he has. Now, let's see what Greens do. Greens have consistently opposed the student cap policy on the ground, that it scapegoats the international student for a housing crisis they did not cause and will damage Australia's reputation as a destination for international students. So, Green have always stood for students. They have abundantly talked about it that no, students are being made the scapegoat of housing crisis, and we have seen from several data, yeah, students are not the real thorn for housing issues. So they might support Labor in their progressive policies to regain the support which they have lost. And these both things can pave way for a more serious and progressive approach to reforming the international education sector, for that matter. It's just not about the money which education sector brings. The key rationale for growth of an international education sector is also building stronger bilateral ties, diplomatic ties, political ties. By increasing the flow of students across border, deeper and more harmonious ties emerge between nations. And that's why for the past 2 decades, Australian government has mainly sought to increase the number of international students in the country. And this rationale has actually paid off. Despite the difficulties studying abroad can entail, many of these students have gone on to make key contribution to business, industry, academia, and government in Australia and abroad. It is not insignificant that most international students in Australia come from China and India. One of them is a global power, and one of them is tipping to be the world's largest national economies by 2050. Strengthening Australia's international education sector will go a long way towards building stronger ties with these nations. It's also true, let's look at the other picture as well, that international student growth cannot continue indefinitely. But a stronger international education sector is not necessarily a larger one. Yeah, it's very important. It's not that we're not talking only about horizontal expansion. It's also about quality expansion, vertical expansion, absorbing. It's the one that builds deeper ties between nations and that better supports the well-being of international students. Ultimately, if we try to conclude this piece, Labour's election victory clears the slate for a more serious and even-handed discussion about international education. There's no doubt that significant challenges lie ahead for the sector and for the people, but it is downright unfair how often international students are blamed for a problem. I hope things improve for them, and do let us know what you think of this piece, which has been published and brought to you by me for my friends and readers.